Hello, good evening. Good evening to those of you in Malaysia, and good afternoon to those of you in Europe. Thank you for logging in wherever you are. There's still people coming into our Zoom room. For those of you who are coming into Zoom room, please put a mute button on so that we can allow Dr. Lau and Darren Lai to continue their conversation later. I am Richard Wee from Richard Wee Chambers, and together with me is my partner, Darren Lai. And of course, the most important person here today is actually Dr. Lau Pin Lean. Dr. Lau is, of course, a Malaysian, and she's a friend of mine. I'm proud to say that she's a friend of mine, and I had even had the honor of her coming in to attend my wedding dinner in Bali many years ago. We had a lot of fun at the time. So it is such a pleasure that from friends now we become a working colleague and trying to expand this area of law and trying to educate people about artificial intelligence and regulating of the artificial intelligence. Now, some background. Again, can I request that everybody put your mute button on as when you come in? We conducted a talk on this topic about 2 months ago. At the time, the topic was called regulating artificial intelligence. What is it about? What is AI? What is the law, etc.? Very general discussion because this area is so new in Malaysia. And surprisingly, Pinian and I thought it would be one of those small, boring topic that only the two of us would be listening. The video was very well received. And you can find it on Richard Wee Chambers RWC YouTube. You just go to YouTube, you search for Richard Wee Chambers, you can find a video with Dr. Lau Pin Lean there. So there we were discussing about the general areas of artificial intelligence. But today, as what we planned even at the last webinar, Dr. Lau will be speaking a little bit more precise on EU draft law. So the European Union, just like their GDPR, right? I stand corrected with the acronym. They are coming up with formulating with a most likely a monumental regulation, rules, and laws pertaining to the regulation of artificial intelligence. There's issues about managing by way of risk, identifying what kind of AI is risky and not risky. And also they have to look at the transparency of the AI and also the proposal to... Can we request to be on mute, please? Thank you. There will also discussion about the fines if someone is in breach of this proposed EU draft law. Now, without further ado, it's already 9:03. I think we can proceed. I will stop sharing screen first. Okay, we see everybody now. Thank you, everybody who's in the room, and much obliged, especially those who are in Malaysia. You could be watching Netflix now, but you choose to come in and listen to the three of us talking. And those who are in UK is probably having a afternoon tea after lunch. So we'll try to make this conversation interesting so that you won't sleep through the afternoon. And for those of you on Facebook, much obliged for logging on. I will first introduce Dr. Lau. Can we have your microphone on mute, please? Thank you, much obliged. So I will be introducing Dr. Lau, where she'll be sharing about a little bit about herself. And then my colleague and partner Darren will be taking over, where he'll be going through the flow. The flow of today's webinar is like this. Number one, obviously we have to introduce AI. And yesterday we put up to explain to people that we are not talking about Terminator or some robotic movies involving Will Smith, where the robot will take over the world. We are not dealing with that kind of AI. This is a different kind of artificial intelligence. Things like your mobile phone telling you what to do. You know what I mean? And then your computer asking you, do you want us to save your password for you? That kind of AI. And so Dr. Lau will be discussing about that. After that, Dr. Lau will be, as you can see from the screen now, discussing about the EU draft regulations. And then the third part of the talk, we will be discussing the application of this. And that's where I think most of us in this room will be having like a roundtable dialogue. Okay, so Dr. Lau, how are you?
Good, thank you very much. Again, very happy to be here, Richard. As always, it's always a huge pleasure to be able to come back and speak to all of you and to engage with our community. Whether it's just, people who just want to find out more or people who just want to really have conversations about, this really fast moving area of technologies.
Yeah, indeed. You know what, the funny thing, Pins, you and I just met 2 months ago, and unbelievably, in these 2 months, there's so many things has happened again in just 2 months.
Yeah.
So it's amazing, and I'm actually looking forward to hear your this interview between Darren and you about EU draft law. And so can I invite you to introduce yourself, and then thereafter Darren will take over.
Okay,
maybe
sure,
you can just share with people who you are. I'm going to switch off my video and let Darren and you take over.
That's very cool. Yeah, thank you very much again, Richard. So I'm Dr. Lau Pin Lean, or in Europe, it's like the name is put the other way, Pin Lean Lau. And I am a lecturer in bio law at Brunel Law School, but I'm also part of the Center for Artificial Intelligence, Social and Digital Innovations at in Brunel University, London as well. I'm very glad to see that I think some of my colleagues from the center are here as well. And obviously, because this is an area that is hugely impactful on all of us, not just in Europe or in the UK, but I think this is going to have far-reaching consequences. And yeah, for all those who are also listening on Facebook, I'm Malaysian, and I currently work in London in the UK. And I'm always really, really happy to be able to share whatever knowledge that I have. I don't profess to be like a super high-level expert, on committees of international organizations, but I enjoy the fact that we're able to do this, at least to cover different barriers, right? And to be able to share whatever I can. Thanks so much. Interestingly, before Darren speaks, I have to say that Darren used to be my student when I was teaching in Malaysia. And he's now a partner.
I knew that was going to come up.
So that really makes you think about your age, guys.
I know. Tell me about it, man. Yeah. So in Malaysia, it will be Selamat Tengah Hari, Cikgu. Good afternoon, Miss Lau. Yeah, you know how Malaysian schools are. We probably stand up in class. Good afternoon, teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot, Darren, for still calling me teacher.
Okay, Darren, all yours.
Thanks, guys. Well, on that basis, I should now say, terima kasih, Cikgu. Well, okay, jokes aside, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Darren Lai. I am a partner at RWC. I've just joined the firm recently in July. So this is one of my first webinars together with RWC. Okay, so well, we have an interesting topic today, which as we all know, we have Dr. Lau, my Cikgu, who will be speaking with us about artificial intelligence, or in short, AI. Now, the mere mention of the word AI, people will start thinking, if those moviegoers, will start thinking about Skynet from Terminator, or even the Red Queen in the Resident Evil series. But fret not, okay? AI is not all about evil supercomputers trying to take over the world, right? AI really, we may not realize, but it has already come into our daily life. Okay, a popular example would of course be the very well-known Apple product Siri and Microsoft product Cortana. See, and also things like virtual assistant. When we go onto the website, we check. Then suddenly there will be one thing at the bottom right popping up. May I help you? So as we know, those are not real people. Those are actually artificial intelligence. Okay, so this without much knowing, the AI is already in our life every day now. So with the growing importance of AI really in our daily lives, there will be bound to be introduction of laws to govern AI. And it's very interesting to know that EU is starting to the ball rolling on this. And of course, we are very pleased to have Dr. Lau tonight to speak to us about the laws being introduced in the European Union to regulate such occurrences, i.e. AI. Okay, so of course, without further ado, Dr. Lau, all yours.
Thank you very much, Darren. So yeah, the purpose of this conversation today is really just to give everyone a very high level overview of what these draft regulations are about, right? Because this is also extremely new. The regulations was published in April this year, April 2021. So, I mean, they call this draft regulations, but really it's a proposal. It's how it works within the European Union. It still has to go through the European Commission as well as the European Parliament. So it's all going to take some time. Now, having said that, having this proposal is extremely valuable at this point of time, because then we're able to look at how a governance framework is going to impact the way businesses are being done, the way AI is going to be governed, categorized, what is the impact this has for society, what about fundamental rights? These are questions that we are all very interested in, right? Sorry, I'm just going to try and, okay, can you see the slide? Yeah, great. Now, from the very outset, these draft regulations, a lot of the structure of it actually takes a lot of inspiration from the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations in the EU, but it also builds a lot on other kinds of different EU legislations. There was the European Commission's white paper on artificial intelligence that was published sometime in 2020, right? The idea of having this kind of harmonized rules within the EU is to really try to create, the ultimate goal is to create a digital single market, right? But one that will still allow businesses to operate, that still encourages innovation, but also allows the protection of fundamental rights, EU values, and ethical principles that could potentially be threatened by any kind of new and emerging technologies such as AI, right? So there is definitely this, this demand or this need for governance, right? Now, the definition of AI, as Darren has already pointed out, we are not interested in the dystopian kind of narratives, right? That's really not what AI is about. And even if that could possibly happen in the future, it's not going to be so simple. That's what we call artificial general intelligence, AGI, where AI systems become so independent that they can basically think on their own. That's not going to happen just yet. We're still at the very stages of the industrialization of AI technologies, where we're just starting to build up, right? So these technologies that we are actually all being exposed to right now, they're all weak or narrow AI. So don't worry and don't go into your bunkers just yet. The world's not going to come to an end just right now, right? Now, also the very interesting thing about the EU draft regulations, if you can look at this pyramid here, which I've actually taken from the proposal of the EU draft regulations, is that the model of governance here is on a risk-based approach, right? So what is being done right here is that there are categorizations of AI according to risk level. So unacceptable, high risk, limited risk, minimal risk, right? Now, I think if most of us are lawyers out here, most of us would be very familiar with how governance or regulation systems work. The very traditional way is to have blanket regulation, right? I think this was something that Richard and I had been discussing. It's interesting that the risk-based approach was used and not a blanket regulation over all AI systems. But also that really makes sense because AI developments are increasing on a daily basis so very quickly that even language that's being used in this regulation right now, I mean, it's quite neutral. It's meant to be technology neutral. It's meant to be all-encompassing and broad enough to sort of capture future developments of AI, but we really don't know, right? How these technologies can be deployed in the future, how much more advanced they're going to be able to get, right? So this means that at some point of time, I don't know, we might actually have to revisit this again. So putting the categorizations into risk becomes the main way of governance here, because it is felt that these would actually capture how different types of AI systems can be well, overlooked or be supervised, right? Now, at the very up at the top, you see unacceptable risks. These are risks. I'm sorry, I'm just going to go into lecture mode here, right? These are risks that are, yeah, sorry, Darren, you were saying?
Oh, please go ahead. I am
Yeah.
all in.
Yeah.
Reliving the memories. Yeah.
Reliving the memories, yeah. So unacceptable risk, what would this encompass? Like, what kind of risk do you think would be unacceptable when it comes to AI systems? Well, I guess if we want to kind of, poke a little bit of fun, it'll be the Terminator kind of AI, I guess, here, right? But really, it's been defined here as AI systems that are a clear threat to safety, to livelihoods, and the rights of people, right? Now, there are certain categorizations under this heading here. So it would cover things like manipulative or exploitive systems, or what they call the subliminal systems that can sort of influence people and kind of creep in, right, with sublime messages, right? What's also banned under here, AI systems, are the real-time remote biometric identification systems that are being used in public spaces for law enforcement. What's also banned is all forms of social scoring. This is where AI or technology is being used to sort of evaluate an individual's trustworthiness based on social behaviors, based on predicted personality traits, based on whether or not they're paying off their bank loans, etc. Right? In my previous talk, the very first talk that I did, I don't know if no, Darren, you weren't here, yeah. But I think Richard might remember that I actually covered that at one point of time in about 2013, China actually had a sort of a social scoring system that used AI to basically predict an individual's social score, right? And what happens is that if you reach a threshold that is unacceptable, then you get banned from things like, flying out of the country or things like that, right? So these are the kind of risks that or AI systems that are completely banned under the legislation. Now that's not the contentious one, right? And also the next level you will see is the high risk category. We'll come back to this, but this is basically high-risk AI systems are those that are defined as, like if you can evaluate consumer creditworthiness, that can assist with recruiting or managing employees, that uses biometric identification, blah, blah, blah. A lot of this might actually be used in businesses and industries worldwide, right? And under the proposed regulations here, AI that come under the high-risk categories, what happens is that the EU would then review and potentially update these lists of systems in the category on an annual basis, right? So let's see, what are some businesses that could potentially be covered under high risk? Even education and vocational training, products, employment, workers management, essential private and public services, law enforcement, migration, asylum, border control, even administrative justice and democratic processes and critical infrastructures. Now, this sounds like you're already thinking, I'm sure, this sounds like everything. We're going to come back to it very shortly, right?
The whole night I slept well, and I thank you for praying alongside with me 3 times.
No, this is my classmate.
Well, that's what we are supposed to do.
Sorry?
It's okay. I am. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you joining us, right? I'm Richard Wee. I do request that you put yourself on mute button, please. And please don't get offended if I go to your screen and click mute for us today. I apologize, but it's for the benefit of Dr. Lau to continue with a conversation. All yours, Pin Lean, all yours.
Oh yeah, thank you again, yeah. So I will come back shortly to high risk, because this is probably where a lot of the potential debates are going to arise, right? And then there's limited risk and minimal risk, which are like, yeah, not so serious in this sense, right? So limited risk, this would be AI with certain kinds of, which is subject to certain kinds of transparency obligations, right? So it would be things like chatbots, right? So for example, if you are logging into the website of a bank and you need a problem to be resolved, they usually ask you what your problem is, and then there's FAQs. The idea is that in this situation, users should be aware that they're actually interacting with the machine, and then they can decide if they want to sort of, make a decision. Do I want to continue with the chatbot, or do I want to speak to a human person, right? And finally, the minimal risk is where this is stuff that we use already every day. This would be like AI-enabled video games, spam filters, things like that, right? And the vast majority of AI systems are actually falling within this particular category of minimal risk. So it's minimal or no risk, right? Now, in the proposals, right, in the regulations, obviously, because these two categories of limited and minimal risk are also raised, right, they are, well, some commenters have said that they have actually gone unnoticed, right, because they're limited risk or because they are minimal risk, right? So when it comes to specific obligations of AI systems in these two categories, right, the so-called stringent requirements that would be applicable to other AI categorizations, the high risk, for instance, is not present here. So here it would be things like just transparency. And even at some points, what is encouraged in AI systems that are of limited or minimal risk is self-regulation, right? Where you can sort of have an association that regulates how you want to use these particular AIs or things like that. So this is really an area that's not touched upon so much in this sense, right? Now, this is where I think a lot of the issues arise, which is how do we define high-risk AI, right? I've just put a link here. Later, I can share these slides as well. So from the examples that I had given you earlier already, it looks like high-risk AI may cover quite a lot of things that are going to be used or are already being used, also being used in businesses worldwide, globally, right? And under the regulations, these particular high-risk AIs will be subject to quite strict obligations before you can even put them on the market, right? So a lot of the discussion is going to be in this area. Now, what are these obligations? Risk assessment and mitigation systems. It has to have, a certain quality of the data sets that feed the systems to minimize risk, to minimize discriminatory outcomes. You have to have activities that can be logged so that results can be traced, right? There must be detailed documentation that provides all information necessary on the system and for authorities to assess compliance, right? There has to be clear and adequate information given to a user. You must have some kind of human oversight as well to be sort of like an oversight or a supervisory agent to minimize risk. And it must have very high levels of robustness and security and accuracy and things like that, right? What does that sound like to all of us?
Total control, man. Yeah.
No, but as a business now, let's say, Richard, let's say if you were a business and you were required to comply with all this, right? I'm going to ask you purely from a business perspective, what's your first concern?
Of course, we need to know the boundaries. What is it that you have to report? All this. There are a lot of uncertainties at the moment, like anything new, normal,
Yeah.
But I think once we can clarify and refine what we have to be accountable for and transparent for, then things will get better. Honestly, Pins, I think even if EU passes laws this year or next year, it will take another 3 to 5 years to get things refined.
Yeah, it's not going to happen so soon. But also one of the things that a lot of businesses are likely to be concerned about is cost. It's going to be cost. What is your cost of compliance? Now, don't forget,
expensive.
When the GDPR was passed, businesses had to sort of have all these components that are in place to ensure that all the protective mechanisms that are under the GDPR are complied with as well. Now, I think like sometime after, this was quite a long time ago, you know, do you guys remember the Enron scandal and all that in the US?
Oh, that's an
Yeah,
old case, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, very old situation. But after Enron, the US passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which basically sort of tried to mitigate the kind of situations that happened in Enron and Lehman Brothers and all those kinds of situations. And what that kind of law had effect of actually implicating financial and foreign investors as well that were investing in the US or were doing business with the US, right? Which means that even if you are located outside the EU, for instance, but your line of business, right, has maybe outputs in the EU, right, chances are you are going to have to comply with this proposed regulation as well.
Yeah, I suspect, Pins, that if this goes through, even we in Malaysia so far away, we may have to comply if we're doing business with Europe.
Yeah, and I mean, just to share a little bit of a personal experience. So I was legal counsel last year. Before I joined Brunel Law School for a short time, I was legal counsel with a major financial institution and a global financial institution. And what happened was we found that a lot of transactions that were carried out in Southeast Asia, for instance, with European businesses and American businesses, especially the European businesses, everyone wanted GDPR to apply. And actually you have to, if you look at the provisions of GDPR. And what I foresee in this instance is that you're going to probably have the same kind of extraterritoriality in terms of how these AI regulations are going to apply as well, right? Now, coming back to the Highrisk AI, right? Highrisk AI, basically, can you guys see this? Basically, these are sort of
Can.
These are sort of the steps in the AI system's life cycle when you're trying to assess if it is a high-risk system, right? And then you have, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But what's unique in the regulations is step 3. It's a standalone AI system in an EU database. So there is actually going to be, this is one of the innovative parts of the regulations here, where there's actually going to be an EU database that will actually be registered with all the high-risk AI systems, right? And this is supposed to be like a really good thing, right? Okay. Now, so these steps, actually what you see here is the life cycle before you can put an high-risk AI out into the market, even before you're using it, right? So earlier we talked about things like, let's say you want to use a robot-assisted tool for surgeries in healthcare. Now that has to go through all these particular steps as well, in addition to all the other European directives that deal with safety and adequacy and standards of medical devices and things like that. Now that's just one example, right? Or let's say in employment. Now, if you're a big firm, or even actually if you're a medium-sized firm, and if you want to, let's say, hire someone for a particular post and you get lots of CVs, and if you want to use an AI system to sort through this CV in your recruitment process to make things easier and shortlist candidates, for instance, that particular system has to go through these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps here as well, right? So again, this kind of brings about not just costs, but also concerns, like you said, Richard, earlier, about the kind of boundaries. But I think for businesses, the most pressing concern is, 1, is my system a high-risk AI system? And 2, if it is a high-risk AI system, how much is it going to cost me? And 3, what is my due diligence following the act, right? Oops, yeah. Okay, so basically, in terms of innovation, I mentioned, first of all, you would have that database for high-risk systems, right? But some of the other innovations in this particular framework also is the fact that we are going to be introduced to what we call the European Artificial Intelligence Board. So this is going to be a board that is set up for the purposes of oversight, right?
I
So
see.
yeah, so in addition to this, the different categories of risk of AI practices and systems, the governance framework includes this pan-European supervisory body called the EAIB, right? And the idea is that it will be composed of senior representatives from each of the EU member states, national supervisory authorities, and also the European Data Protection Supervisor. It is chaired by the European Commission, and the main task is to ensure that regulation is applied consistently across the EU, right? Now, the reason why I raise this is because, which also ties into my next point, is that this EAIB is going to be highly significant for AI lawyers, as the European Data Protection Board is to privacy lawyers and to data protection lawyers as well, right? So this EAIB is going to be the entity that interprets rules, the complex points, and I guess even novel legal issues that actually might come up during this time, right? And also another thing about the governance framework, besides the database and besides the EAIB, is the fact that there are provisions on regulatory sandboxes as well that are going to be used within the purview of these regulations, right? Yeah, so I'm just going to stop here and maybe try and field maybe if Richard or Darren might have anything that you want to raise so far.
Well, the only thing that keep coming to my mind is Brexit, actually, when you talk about
Yeah,
EU
Brexit.
laws.
Yeah.
How is
So
it
what's
going
your
to-
question about Brexit?
Well, I'm just wondering, because with Brexit, okay, how is it going to, will this be applicable? Because if it's going to be a far-reaching consequence or implications to other countries, including even Malaysia. So what happens to, things like Brexit?
Okay,
So
great.
that keeps
That's
playing in my mind.
a fantastic question, Darren. And I think it's also a very, I'm going to go here to where I wanted to talk about this extraterritoriality. So even with Brexit, even with Brexit, and that's why I think also these regulations are going to be super important for jurisdictions beyond the EU. It's got to do with the extraterritorial effect of the regulations itself. Now, because I told you earlier, right, it's sort of based on a similar approach in the GDPR. The geographical scope of this regulation is really expensive, right? So if an AI system, bottom line, if an AI system is placed on an EU market or its use affects people that are located in the EU, the draft regulation becomes engaged immediately, right? Regardless whether the actors involved are located inside or outside of the EU, right? So therefore, companies in the UK, companies in Singapore, further, right, are potentially in scope and can be at risk of non-compliance, even if this is a European Union regulation, right? So does that sort of answer your question, Darren?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so
Thanks.
it's
Yeah.
I suppose,
so,
Pins, sorry, to follow up from there, I suppose, because now technically England or UK is outside EU, then it'll be interesting to see what happened to UK first. Because so then we can learn, because now UK and Malaysia are effectively more or less internationally. Of course, I'm simplifying it, so don't get offended, those who are from UK. But you're basically same standard with Malaysia. Because now EU will look at UK like the way they look at Malaysia, except of course you are Europe, we are Asia, we know that. So my logic now is that it will be interesting for me to follow my friends in UK, the British lawyers, and find out from them, hey, how are you dealing with this? So that we can use the same experience to apply to Malaysia. Because I am concerned, I'm not sure how we're going to apply this in Malaysia, Pins.
Yeah, But just to share with you, you are absolutely right. The UK does not currently have any specific legislation on AI, right? But what is happening is that I think following Brexit, and probably even before Brexit itself, I mean, this is just my opinion, I think the wheels were already in motion because there is a lot of research that's currently being funded into the regulation of AI systems in the UK itself, right? And within the UK, these particular, the main concerns are about responsibility, right? Trustworthiness, right? So, and ethics and liability, all these are built into the considerations of what a potential AI legislation in the UK would look like. So I know for a fact that I'm not working on them, but I know people who are currently working on projects already that are being funded by the UK Research and Innovation, right? To be able to answer these particular questions for the UK, right? But also coming back to the extraterritorial scope of the draft regulation, this is what we called the first mover advantage, right? It's sort of the, you know, like social media influencers and stuff like that. So in here, the EU is kind of the influencer, right? The significance of it is because the draft is really one of the world's first most comprehensive legal framework for AI, right? Yeah, no matter how comprehensive, we will still be able to find loopholes at some point, right? But the fact is that it is, right? And because of this very wide approach, and the fact that the EU has sort of been a front runner in this kind of regulation in the past as well, right? The influence of this regulation is going to be felt in other countries when they're ready to come and regulate AI, including the UK, I think, right?
Yeah.
So even if they have different rule books, stuff like that, especially, but you would see companies like global firms, global tech firms may actually want to, you know, have protections that are similar to the provisions that are provided in this particular regulations. But of course, I mean, assuming there's, you know, a way to make sure it's compatible with local laws as well. Yeah, so it will be important. These rules will actually be important in the UK. It will be important beyond the UK as well.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
So I'm still, like everybody else in the room, I'm hearing this for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like very exciting. I'm sorry, it's not the Terminator, but Matrix 4 is coming out. I'm sorry, it's not like that. It really has to do with a lot of the practical application of governance, and really, I think it affects more. And obviously, as people, users, like we would likely be users. Obviously, there are going to be business groups as well that are going to be affected here. Right.
No, Pins, I was going through our first video we did 2 months ago. And my memory, so correct me if I'm wrong, I'm still trying to get a grip of this topic.
Sure.
Let's first go back to basics before we talk about regulation. What kind of AI are we talking about? So I start thinking about the online shopping apps, which basically know what we want, and and then social media, which effectively is following whatever we're doing. Our behavior sometimes is in reaction to our social media. They know that I like to eat, so then they keep on. They know I put pictures up on food. Suddenly, everything on my feed is all about food. So these are clearly AI, isn't it? That's first.
Yes.
That's AI. So
that's AI,
that even like some famous mobile phones, I don't even give the name of the brand. You talk to the phone will tell you what to do. That app, so even that is a AI, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
these are all different forms of AI systems.
Yeah, so that's why what you said earlier was quite resounding, because effectively, whether we like it or not, AI is very much surrounding us now in Malaysia, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So that means this is inevitable. Once the EU draft law is passed, and if we are engaging in any apps or whatever website or whatever which is from Europe or have relevance to Europe or connected to Europe, we will have to comply, like GDPR, right?
Yeah. You definitely do. And in fact, sometimes it really depends also, right? I don't know if you get this, but I actually do get it on my phone. I'm in the UK, right? So I communicate a lot with colleagues and friends in the EU. Well, I'm just using the word EU, right? And there are certain instances where I actually cannot send certain things to them. And then it will say that this particular email cannot go through because of GDPR or privacy requirements in the European Union. And then I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah. So I have actually experienced that. But also, Richard, you raised a very interesting question. You talked a little bit about, the algorithms and how it keeps
Yes. We spoke about that last time, yeah.
So, so when the proposal first came out, it was open for a public consultation where anybody who was interested, most of the stakeholders really were mostly businesses, right? Where they could actually upload their feedback about what these draft regulations might be. They could upload questions. So I've looked at a few of those. A lot of those are huge businesses like Siemens, Irish German companies. And then interestingly, Facebook's question to the European Commission, they wanted to know if whether the AI Act, right, this AI regulation, remember earlier we spoke about how you want to ban subliminal techniques.
Yeah.
Now they wanted to find out the extent, this extent.
I wonder why. I wonder why.
To find out if this actually applies to targeted advertising. Right, and right now we don't actually know as well, right? Yeah, and there were companies, that deal with facial recognition, and they're saying like, wow, this is going to be so much responsibility on the providers of AI systems instead of the users, right? And that how are we going to how are you going to assess if our systems are high risk or not, right? So that's kind of what a lot of businesses are very concerned with right now.
Yeah. I'm also in our proposed format. We are supposed to see how we're going to apply this to the society.
Yeah.
Right. So that was why I thought let's go back to two months ago, where before we talk about applying to society, let's first find out what is AI. Because some people, when I spoke to, because of the perception that AI is Terminator, then they say, no, Richard, I don't know what you're talking about this topic. You're trying to go so far ahead. I said, no, AI is around us. No lah. But everything I read so far suggests that almost every time we log on onto our laptops and our mobile phone, we are already using AI.
Yeah, I would say that as well. I would say that the moment technology is engaged, chances are AI is also already engaged.
Yeah. So then that flows with that issue lah. Macam mana mau regulate, how to regulate, isn't it? Yeah.
Just to add on, actually AI is very general in a sense.
Yeah, it is.
There is, to my simple understanding, there is simple AI and there is not so simple AI, and there's very interesting high value AIs, But AI in general really it's all over, it's everywhere.
Yeah. And even if it's everywhere, this is still weak AI, or what we call narrow AI. It accomplishes a lot, but it's still weak or narrow AI, right? So I guess when you think about regulations like this coming into force, right? Obviously, as end users, we are the end users who will either benefit or find that AI systems actually help to make our lives easier. But also the obligations are really now imposed on providers, right? So in the Act itself, there are various definitions of what a provider is. I'm not going to go into it because, I don't want to crack your skulls right now, right? But there's all these definitions about who a provider is, who is a user. And if you're a company that uses a chatbot, who is the user here? Actually, you'll be quite surprised. The user is not the person who uses the chatbot, which is the customer.
Yeah,
it's the
company, yeah.
Yeah, so, there are all these very fine lines of definitions between providers, between users, between suppliers, manufacturers, right? And I think, Richard, one of the things that I told you about is that within the Center of AI at Brunel, my colleagues and I, we do have many ongoing projects because we're an interdisciplinary sort of center here, right? But also, one of the concerns that, at least the ones that I have looked at with some colleagues, deals with issues of legal liability, embedding ethics at different stages of an AI system's life cycle.
Mm, mm.
You know?
Interesting. But you know, as Darren is the main moderator, I'm a busybody here. But
it's okay. You can see body all your
I'm
life.
trying to provoke a conversation dialogue with everybody here also at the same time. But my immediate reaction to our question: how is the EU draft law applying to the society? I don't think it will actually apply to the society per se, but it will apply to companies, businesses, and entities who are the one use. Yeah, that's the one. So like the person on the street in Malaysia, the person who's selling char kway teow, he or she probably won't be affected. You know, yeah. So the EU draft law won't reach that char kway teow seller.
In that sense,
Yeah. But the company who is promoting the sale of the char kway teow on a certain app, using the algorithm to buy and sell and do delivery of food, for example, that company may be liable. EU draft law. Do you think so, Darren?
Yeah,
I think
agree,
that's definitely. I'm trying to see.
I'm just figuring out. I mean, if also Darren, you are doing litigation. Imagine if this is being litigated, right, in Malaysia. Let's say
anywhere.
How are we going to defend the case or even propagate a case? If someone wants to initiate a suit, and then like I see a private note to me here. How do you embed ethics? Because this AI, you need ethical and integrity to be embedded into it. So like you said,
this is where we feel that when it comes to governance of AI, well, at least this is my feeling. It cannot just be us as lawyers saying, okay, I'm going to regulate, because I have absolutely zero clue how the technology works. It really has to be what I call it has to be the whole of the world approach. You need ethicists, people who are specialized in ethics of technologies. You need the people who are actually working on the ground, people who are going to use the system. So it's really this is the word that the director of our center likes to use, right? The ecosystem. It really is an ecosystem where it all has to come together to sort of come up with a system that really does at least take into consideration all these particular values that we're talking about.
Since just now, please you share with us that story about Facebook inquiring of all the questions, that question. Now that question about subliminal whatever thinking, right? My England also good. That is issues of integrity and ethics, So how do you regulate that? You think about it, right? So
I don't know. I mean, I have answers. I have no answers at this point of time. I think first of all, I think the act is fantastic because it is very comprehensive.
Yeah, it is. I went through it. It's oh my God, 200 pages, few hundred pages.
Like 100+ pages. But I think in practical, I think in reality, it is going to be very, very difficult. I think it's going to be difficult. I think that first of all, if something comes to court, I think a judge is going to have to basically exercise all sorts of creativity.
I don't know how if this case comes up to our judge, most of our judges, of course, will be able to handle it. But what if the judge is not ready to handle it? Let's be frank, this is not looking down on the ability or capability of any judge in the world, but this is so new. Yeah, it's so new. Yeah.
Oh, I've seen a question here.
Yeah, there's a few, but Darren, you want to take the questions, Darren? All yours. You're on mute, Darren. Oh, okay. I think something happened, Darren. We have a question here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for posing.
I'm sorry, some technical issues.
Oh, your kids are no problem.
Yes.
I just now I had to switch off my video. You know why? Because my lovely cat decided to walk past the camera again. Okay, all yours, Darren. There are a few questions for you. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, the first one is from George. He said, "Hello, Dr. Lau. I'm George. Pleasure to meet you. Currently undertaking research in AI regulation." Now, the question are as follows. Number one, Since the draft law requires creators to sign a conformance requirements, does it mean that any subsequent mischief would rightfully ascribe liabilities to them, regardless of an absence in causation? And if so, do you agree with this approach?
So like a LLB exam question,
Yes.
man. Well done, George. That's
Thank you
good.
very much for the question, George.
Yeah.
First of all, I think this is one of the loopholes here that we're not so sure of. First of all, the regulations, I should change my slide, sorry, before I answer this question. Okay. The regulations, they are fantastic, okay? It's great, it's very comprehensive, right? But because we are lawyers, we always want to criticize everything, right? And we always but then certain things are true and need to be said, right? For example, one of the criticisms is that the regulation basically also takes like existing EU laws or directives from product development, manufacturers' liability, and things like that, right? So to answer your question, George, right, the first question, I don't think we are going to be able to see how mischief might be attributed. I think at this point, really, it just goes by the definition of who is a provider and who is a supplier, right? But I think you're right in raising this question because it goes, in my opinion, it goes beyond just someone who provides, right? Because in my opinion, I think that there is a life cycle when an AI system is being developed, right? So from the time of its inception, the inception of that idea, all the way to its deployment into the public realm, there are very different stages over here. And I think this is a question that I grappled as well with one of my colleagues. We were talking about whether or not, and this might be, most of us I think here are from common law jurisdictions, but this might be something that lawyers from civil law jurisdictions might find to be a little bit like not so sure about. We looked at whether it could come under product liability in tort law. We looked at whether it could come under negligence and issues of remoteness and causation in tort law as well. So, George, thank you for your question one, because that's kind of what I was looking at with some of my colleagues as well, right? So I don't think that any subsequent mischief would actually immediately or automatically ascribe liabilities. And I think most of the penalties that are in the regulations so far cover fines, right? The other problem with the regulations is that it's not clear what the redress mechanisms will be. It basically says, these are the laws, these are Highrisk AI, these are the obligations you have to comply with, but it doesn't really specify how people are going to get redress from situations if there is a breach, for instance. So that's kind of one of the loopholes because of this patchworking. And because of this patchworking, I think what happens is that, I don't know, this is just my opinion, and because it's so new, I think what's going to happen is that you are still going to have to look back at some other EU directive or some other EU law where it's patchworked into the AI regulation, and then try to take guidance from there, right? And second question, is the draft law too strict? Well, it really depends who you're asking. In my opinion, I don't think
it's strict. I
don't think it's too strict. I don't think it's strict. I think, but also at the core of it, a lot of my research actually deals with how technologies affect fundamental rights and liberties. So I would actually say the law is not strict enough. I think we need more human rights protections. Although commentators are already saying that this particular regulation actually does have much more human rights protections than they would, in some of the previous papers or some of the previous drafts that had come before already. So I don't draft is too strict, but I think the idea of regulatory sandboxes is good as well, because that then allows AI growth and developments to happen.
I would think it is not really, in terms of strictness, not really, but more towards the cost issue. Like if cost is going to be an issue, will developers of technology products, be deterred in a sense?
Yeah.
So cost in practical approach on a practical approach it may deter, but I think in the terms of the law, I agree.
Good point.
Thank you. Also, Asia says she agrees the law is not strict enough in terms of ethics. Yeah. It's also quite interesting. I don't know what is the demographic of everyone who's over here, but I have spoken to some people who are basically, they are the engineers, the people who are actually working on the systems, right? I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying that engineers have a different perception on how the systems should be like. So if I ask an engineer and say, dude, how do we make sure that your system is ethical? And he'll be looking at me like, what are you talking about? What I mean.
So, Pins, history has shown in our human civilization, if the regulation or the regulatory issues don't step in, people will continue pushing the boundaries. And we know sometimes the boundaries can be pushed very, very far. So we respect, I think AI has had a free reign for many, many decades. And we've seen how AI can cause chaos sometimes. So if not properly regulated. So yeah, I think we need it. In my view, I think we need it. Just like the GDPR, I think we need it. Just a matter of the line to draw lah. Whether you draw it closer to us or push it away from us. So that will be the only question that we have at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you want to make sure that the technologies can continue to be developed and they are not being
they're not impeded. Yeah.
Correct.
At the same time, so I guess this is where it comes to this whole balancing act, right? And what we in constitutional law say, the proportionality, right?
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah.
Where does this balancing interest lie? And I think most concerns about AI so far, at least in terms of the human rights components, would actually be things about surveillance and use of data, informed consent, those kind of things, facial recognition technologies, for instance, right? Like, how concerned are you that facial recognition technologies might actually be part of surveillance requirements in law enforcement, right? So one of the things that is challenging is that under the first category, the banned list, completely banned one, right?
Completely out, yeah.
Completely banned biometric facial real-time remote biometric identification system in publicly accessible spaces for law enforcement. But this is the loophole. It doesn't ban remote biometric identification systems for law enforcement that are not real-time. Do you follow?
So that means the law enforcement people can use it anytime.
Yeah, well, if it's not real time, then if it's not real, they cannot use it if it's real time. Get it?
But they can use it when it's not real time.
Yeah. So that's my point.
So in other words, they can use the recorded version.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
That's quite a I'm sure there's a logic to it, but I can't seem to get my mind around it yet. Not yet, yeah.
And then other human rights concerns would always be like, let's say, obviously when you are programming an AI system, you need to have the human component first, right? And there's always this talk a little bit about algorithmic bias and whether or not this bias then becomes a pattern that the AI system learns and then has the effect of, let's say, marginalizing certain, groups of people and things like that, right? So I've got a professional colleague of mine wrote a very interesting article. If you're interested, I can send it to you. Her article,
yeah.
Article reads, "May I have some human rights with my AI law?"
Oh, okay. That's a good angle.
It's an interesting angle, right? And it's more like from the human rights angle, yeah. So I mean, human rights activists say that there's not enough and that we still need to do more, right? like guarantee, right to life, right to live free from discrimination, right to a fair trial. Because I mean, like with algorithmic bias, with things like targeted advertising and marketing and media and things like news headlines even have such a dramatic way of basically, sort of enslaving you to a certain kind of group already. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But moving to back home in Malaysia for a while, we have seen trends over the last 20 to 30 years where when the data issue came up, Malaysia formed the regulators for data. We even have regulators pertaining to joint management board for properties. And in recent times, we have regulators for fintechs. We now know who regulate cryptocurrency in Malaysia. We have Bank Negara regulating online insurance. So I think I see that regulating AI will be a natural progression for Malaysia. But the only question is how and what? How are we going to regulate and what are we regulating actually? If you know what I mean, Yeah,
I suppose it really is. I guess that's why it makes sense that the EU has come up with this, right? In this sense, because I guess it's a good question. How do you regulate? Because I guess you need to know what you're regulating.
Yeah. So we can't just, like PDPA was very, very clear, right? We have data. They realized 20 years ago, we are collecting more and more data. And then in the late, I think 2005 to 2010, the government pushed for the PDPA through. So that was obviously it was intangible, but we know it's there. Whereas AI is absolutely intangible, but we just can feel it, we can use it. And I'm not even sure which ministry will fall under Malaysia. Is it under Home Ministry, under MOSTI, Ministry of Science and Technology,
Yeah.
And
at the outset, probably MOSTI, the science.
Probably lah, yeah. Or could it be communication under CMA? We do have the multimedia committee. They may put there, under there.
It's interesting because when you raise MCMC, I've came across issues where logistic companies, actually have to get license from MCMC.
Yeah. So that's why, Darren, you think about it, right? I mean, just a topic of conversation, a typical teh tarik session for us now. Like, if it does come to Malaysia, how is it going to come in? Who's going to govern it? Who will lead it? There are very, very few authorities here. We may have to call Pin Lean to come back to become the commissioner, right? Someone needs to be a commissioner to run it, to manage it. And then see, to regulate something, people must first understand what they are being regulated for. Here, we don't even know that AI is with us. So some people are living in denial that they have AI around us.
Yeah, so it really starts from building the awareness that actually you are living in an AI age as well.
Exactly.
And also, the other
so much, right?
Another possible supervisory body that I see could also be, like you say, the Home Ministry, Defense Ministry, even at some point for certain aspects.
Exactly. It may come into that because
depending on the risk.
The
risk level, right?
System, and also a point which I forgot to make is that the draft AI regulations here does not regulate military activities.
Of course, we know that they never regulate. The next, I tell you, next time, Pin, you mark my words, the next war and battle we have is about sending all this AI through the internet to attack the other nation. Only an analog nation will survive the next war. But
hackers already do it. I guess it's just whether or not they are publicized. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hackers are probably doing this like every second of every day.
Yeah.
Topple systems, you know what I mean? Trying to create chaos.
Well, Darren, we are already at 10 o'clock. We are exactly 1 hour into our talk. I guess we got another 15 minutes to half an hour. Maybe we can open up to the floor here. Anybody would like to switch on your video and
so I'm going to stop my screen now so that we can.
It's actually okay. It's a nice photograph.
Yeah.
This is our building, and this little like red door here. Our center for AI is somewhere around here. I think we have a lab and everything.
I can't wait to visit
Very
UK
nice.
again, especially when I'll be traveling to Goodison Park. Probably stop by and visit Brunel for a while. But moving to the next stage, can we invite anybody here who would like to switch on the video or continue typing on your chat box? If not, then we'll just ask a few more questions and we can wrap it up for tonight.
Yeah.
Darren?
Yep. Please feel free to ask any questions. Switch on your video and just ask any questions. And Dr. Lau will try to answer your questions.
I'll ask a question, Pin Lean. What I've read so far, and I've read some really good articles written by famous law firms around the world. I give my hats off to these law firms who have already understood the problem and already even to the point of writing articles and being critical about the situation. One of the issues I read is about the penalty, the proposed penalty pins. That apparently there are penalties. I read here that there are penalties up to euro 30 million in fine. It's all about being fined. It doesn't look like anybody will be imprisoned for this.
No, usually no, because I guess the difficulty is trying to identify. A lot of this would be corporate personalities, Richard.
Yeah, how to be culpable, right?
You cannot attribute an individual to take a prison sentence in this sense, you know.
Yeah.
This would come under corporate fines, corporate personhood lah. So fine is probably the way to hit it where it matters lah. Yeah.
I read here the up to 30 million. There's even some to 20 million for certain. It's actually going to be based on the worldwide annual turnover for non-compliance of the AI system. That's the phrase that I see. So it's very interesting. They're going to fine you based on how much money you made.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's interesting also, because then it comes down to the issue of cost, right? First of all, you need to spend money to implement the provision of the regulations, right? And I was reading somewhere, it says that there was a study that was done by a Federal Statistical Office in Germany, right? And it predicts that by 2025, the global AI industry will pay about 1.6 to 3.3 billion euros for compliance costs only. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Some lawyers are going to make a lot of money in Europe. Well done to European lawyers.
Further, the study also shows it is likely that between 5 to 15% of AI in Europe are probably going to be categorized as high risk. And with high risk, of course, you have the additional cost, right? Because you have all those other strict obligations that you need to comply with. So
interesting. But don't worry, in Malaysia, our legal fees here are always, I'm being polite, very competitive. Recently, Pins, I had a matter where we were referring a case to a foreign law firm within Asia, and we were shocked that that law firm quoted a fee about 5 times more than what we will quote the exact same work in Malaysia. So let's say we are drafting a letter of demand here, and our quote is X amount of ringgit. That country, the same letter of demand is 7 times more. And the people in that country are paying, and here, despite giving that rate, our clients are still asking for discount. So I think if anybody wants to get cheap lawyers to come to Malaysia. But no lah, we've got really good lawyers. It's just I think sometimes Malaysians take us for granted, the law firms. Now back to this. But the problem is this, Pins. What kind of lawyer can give advice when we ourselves don't know this area?
Well, I suppose that's why it's probably a good thing to start really just getting familiar with all this and just being able to try and build a profile, right? I think because this legislation is still very new, a lot of people are still very excited about it, right? And so many have so many things to say. We're hoping at least by the time it rolls out, which could be if you look at the GDPR, right, it took 6 years before it actually rolled out, right? So this came out in this year, right? So let's say 6 years lah, right? We have 6 years to become experts.
Yeah, man. Yep. Oh God, 6 years time I'll be more than 50 years old. Oh my God.
But yeah, which is it's a good time to really start thinking about some of the key questions that are likely to arise, lah. So I think it's timing. We have no choice. We have to move with the tides, lah.
Yeah.
I
But I
was
must confess, Pins, this area very intriguing to Darren and me, lah.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm very intriguing. Even when Darren haven't joined RWC yet, I was telling him about this interview. He was like, "Huh? Got such area?"
Yeah.
So I've been following this area for a long time, and when I discovered that you are doing it, Brunel, I was so excited. I said, "Oh, I got a friend who can speak with," and I feel Malaysian lawyers have to, just like lawyers from 15 years ago who stepped in to do PDPA. I think Malaysian lawyers now have to step in and step up to know about AI laws quickly.
I think also one of the things that I really want to say is that a lot of people are very wary about the applications of AI for us, right? And there's always this great concern is it going to take over my job? Right? Because this happened with the Industrial Revolution. Let's face it, when we had coal and then we had steamships and whatever, right? But that's just the way evolution works and how histories then just form and become part of legacies, right? And actually what I would like to highlight is that really we should be in a position right now, for example, having this regulation for one, we should be in a position to try to make AI work for us and not the other way around.
No matrix, lah.
Yeah, no matrix. So by having these kinds of controls in places, right? I mean, that's a way to ensure that we try to maximize the use of AI, for our benefit.
Hi, Pin, we got Datuk Mary, our federal court judge. Hi, Judge. Good evening.
Hi,
I must say it's a real pleasure to have you back. Can I share with them, Judge, that you were also in our last talk?
Yes, I was.
Judge, all yours, Judge. All yours, Judge. All yours, Judge.
Pin, thank you so much. I mean, you're just getting better and better. As I said to Richard, you are sublimal. You're almost going to go into areas of surrealism. I'm sure you are aware of the fact that we've implemented AI for sentencing in the country.
I've read about it. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, we've not just talked about it, we've implemented it. It was a pilot project about a couple of years back in Kota Kinabalu, just before David CJSS retired. He was so happy to launch it, finally get it off the ground. I mean, just listening to you, I'm very concerned as to whether or not the GDPR were in our minds awareness at that time. I'm not sure whether there is any impact at all, but I think, was it last month or 2 months ago, I was invited to give a talk at the some prize ASEAN Law Awards or something like this, something of that nature.
ALB Award, Judge.
ALB Awards,
the one that,
ASEAN Law Business Awards. You won some of prizes.
Yeah, we won something there.
Correct. And I was making the observation and borrowing from Richard Susskind, the guru of AI and replacing old lawyers in this world. But and borrowing quite a few of his ideas. But I was also talking about the fact that AI has replaced judges. And I'm just wondering, I'm just concerned, I would need to go back to the blueprint to see if these questions of ethics, these questions of accountability, I'm sure they were, crossed their minds when they were coming out with a system, because I don't know whose system it is and how it actually works. It hasn't left the Sabah shores since its implementation 2 years ago. Any comments? Do you know of any other jurisdictions which use AI for sentencing? They decided this was really to cut down the complaints of inconsistent. A housewife shoplifting gets a year's jail and somebody else gets a smack on the hand.
Thank you, Judge. The thing is that I have not actually conducted any sort of research into this particular field and the use of AI, at least within the judiciary and the justice system. I have read about it, and yes, I think from my understanding, it's the fact that they want to sort of preserve the humanness, the rationality and the reasoning of judicial reasonings for judges, human judges, and that the more sort of, I don't know if I'm correct using this word, mundane tasks can be then attributed to an algorithmic system that would then be able to take in certain data sets based on the kind of crime, for instance, the quantum of the crime, the reasoning, the mitigation for such crime, and then to be able to come up with a reasonable solution. I mean, my understanding always has been that this would actually help judges reduce their workload. I don't know, of course, if it actually does, but that's basically only what I've read about so far. I mean, obviously there's great concern, and I think one of the things that always bounce back to us is, do we think AI is going to be able to replace judges? And my answer is always absolutely not. Absolutely.
Well, that's just, but you see, if you notice what I had said, it was AI in sentencing, and it's in criminal law, and it would be, it's the area where you think you'll be the last bastion. Unfortunately, is where we have tried it out. I would have thought that one of the best areas to try it out would be on claims, on your standard claims, your running down kinds of personal injury claims, where you put in, you know exactly how much a limb is going to cost depending on what kind of fracture it is. But unfortunately, it wasn't in that kind of area where you would look at uniformity. It was actually in criminal law. And there you see, contrary to your opinion that judges ought not to be replaced in this area, because this is where the largest, it's that legal reasoning and that power of discretion. We've been replaced. And I commented that evening that I'm not too sure whether I'm sad about it, or I'm happy that it's not my time. It's your time.
Yeah, but it's true, Judge. For sentencing, to me, now that we've put that in the system, it has replaced judges. It has, to some extent. But I feel, Judge, I stand corrected because I've not been to criminal court for quite some time. But it's actually effectively a souped-up compendium. It's a compendium of sentencing with this app or software telling us what it should be done when, as you said, Judge, send a shoplifting case. But it's a good start, I guess. At least it goes to show the judiciary is embracing it, and we can slowly work towards that, Judge.
Well, this brings me to my question, actually, Pin. You were talking about the ethics.
Yeah.
How is there still any ethics here?
I'd love to think so. I'd love to think that there is, and that these ethical values and principles are so important. A few months ago, we hosted a seminar that was given by a former colleague of mine, and his work really is just about mapping AI ethics. That's all his research is about. And I mean, ethics is not my area, it's his, but he was telling me about how difficult it is. And it's about finding that balance with the practical elements of AI applications and what it's to deliver to us in terms of outcome and results, but also making sure that, principles such as trustworthiness, responsibility, ethics, all this can be factored in. But I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think
those are human ethics. Those are human ethics, isn't it?
Human values, yeah, I would say human values.
So how do you impose hence that surrealism and subliminal concerns? How do you impose human ethics to a dimension that we are not even there?
Well,
and you actually created this intelligence because your ethics couldn't take you there. So how do you then
That is
drag your
deep, man.
ethics? How do you then drag your ethics into that? What did you say? Your ecosystem, or was it your equal system?
Yeah.
Equal ecosystem.
Your equal ecosystem. The whole idea of AI, I thought, was it was to overcome human ethics.
Well, partially, I would say yes. Partially,
Because you had reached areas you couldn't cross. Well, I'm Richard. I've said enough. Thank you.
No, please,
Thanks,
Judge,
thank you
please
so
say.
much.
Don't leave. Yeah.
No, I'm just
Yeah, but
no, thank
your
you, but thank you
questions have
so
made
much.
me think even deeper now.
yeah, really, it is. It is.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying right now. It's wow, that's a lot of food.
Yeah, Pins, what the judge just opened up is mine is that if we are supposed to use this because we have failed to do that, how then regulating it is like,
That
yeah.
means we're actually coming right back right now.
Going one back, one round, yeah.
We're coming back full circle to purposes.
Mm,
Why was AI created in this sense? I guess what's the ultimate aim, and how are AI systems meant to serve us, to make our lives better, or are they meant to be an extension of something we cannot be? And I think there are actually several schools of thought about that as well.
I like the part, Pins.
Sorry?
The one you said about doing something which we can't be.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of there is definitely groups that also believe that AI should be seen as extensions of human capacities that are limited by the biological form.
Pins, earlier on we were just saying that we hope if the matter is litigated, we have judges who are able to hear the case. I think we've got the answer.
We've got our judge here.
We've got our judge here who will probably be able to tackle.
I'm retiring soon.
We'll bring you back, Judge. We'll bring you back. But thank you so much, Judge. Thank you. Especially on a Friday evening. You should be resting after a long day in court and you join us to listen to three lawyers babbling.
I'm teaching criminal advocacy tomorrow morning.
Oh no, still working. Thank you very much, Judge, for helping the bar.
Thanks
Much
so much.
obliged. Thank you. Good night, Judge. Yeah.
Good night.
So I guess any more inquiries from the floor, Darren?
Yeah. Well, no inquiries from me, but more of like a thought that came about after listening to Judge Dato' Mary Lim earlier in how AI is replacing judges. At the same time, I'm just thinking of how AI will replace lawyers in the long term. And the first thought that came to me, because as a litigator, I still think I'm irreplaceable at the moment. But I'm just thinking on corporate lawyers side, even conveyancing lawyers side, how AI was, if it comes, blockchain and whatnot is going to, it can severely affect, or even family law lawyers who does, for example, will writing and whatnot. To a large extent, I think AI will be able to usurp the duties.
Or you use
so that's just my thought on that.
Darren, your choice of words is very telling. You use the words usurp as opposed to
replace,
assist. Or
but to me, Pins is inevitable. It's inevitable. Some of our practice areas will be replaced.
I agree that actually, well, the hope. I mean, this is idealistic, but the hope is that AI systems, especially, can be used for contract management like I'm talking at the very basic level, right? So you're talking about your conveyancing matters, the Schedule E, or was it Schedule E? I cannot remember already.
Schedule G and H.
Oh, Schedule G. Okay,
G
whatever.
and H. Yeah.
Schedule G and H, the idea is that AI systems will be able to just reproduce this for you so that you don't have to worry about it. And then you just get your lawyers to check it through. The idea is that it's supposed to be able to automate your so-called standard form agreements. But the lawyers are still necessary. I tell you, right? Your conveyancing lawyers, your corporate lawyers, litigators, you are still all going to be highly relevant because there's going to be elements that deal with negotiation.
Yep.
And your AI system is not going to be, your AI might be able to make decisions based on subsets, right? But then it doesn't negotiate in the way that a human person does.
You know, Pins, I'm going to say something controversial. If Kalal against public smoke balls is, appeared before a AI judge, I think the AI judge can decide because it's very compartmentalized. Is it a mere path? Is it a offer? Is it an acceptance? And eventually the judge, the internet judge, will come to a conclusion. But when it comes to technical matters relating to human behavior, whether, for example, you mentioned earlier about family, who gets custody, issues of matrimonial home issues, etc., etc. I somehow think that part may take some time for AI to usurp or assist human beings. But we as a human being must be prepared that we've opened the doors for a long time ago for AI to come in. It's just a matter of time it will replace us if you're not alert enough.
There are also similar concerns, of course, that AI will also replace medical professionals, physicians.
Yeah, I read that too. Yeah.
There is here as well, because especially now you have robotic assisted surgeries, and they are actually super helpful, right?
And very precise.
Precise, correct.
Very precise.
Beings can be.
Yeah.
But I guess the idea is that whether or not you want to see the robots as being able to take over the job of a neurosurgeon in future, I mean, that's the idea is that the neurosurgeon will use the technologies to help him become much better than he is.
Okay, it's almost 10:30. I think we're almost time already. Maybe Pins, you would like to wrap it up?
Yeah, basically I've wrapped up. But thank you very much again for inviting me to speak here. I hope that, if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to try and answer them. Or, if you have just any thoughts at all to engage in discussions, I mean, I very much look forward to that, right? I'm not an expert in the EU draft regulations, but I mean, I think that this particular regulation itself gives us a lot of food for thought for the future.
Yeah. Darren, anything you want to wrap up?
No, nothing much further. Just like to thank Dr. Lau for sharing. I learned a lot today in terms of AI. And as if how I started by saying Terima kasih cikgu, again I have to say Terima kasih cikgu.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to thank everybody who's on Facebook who followed us. And we also thank everyone who stayed on here. Which includes the Honorable Federal Court Judge, much obliged. I also see some of the lawyers here, some of the people here, lawyers. Much obliged for joining us. But very important, I think we should all give a round of applause for Dr. Lau, who spent her afternoon in England now and made very cow coffee to stay awake in the afternoon to do this. And thank you. Give a cyber round of applause to Pin Lean. Terima kasih. Pins, will do this again. Maybe in 3 to 4 months' time, we can see the development of EU draft law. I would love to hear from you again. And as you and I discussed, we like to do this as a series of talks under RWC. For your information, Dr. Lau, we've met another Dr. Sik, and her name is Dr. Sik, I think, from University of Malaya, who's also she wrote an article about this. So we are approaching her. Maybe we'll get her to speak, if she agrees. We don't know. But yeah, there are professors in Malaysia too, talking about AI and regulation. So anyway, terima kasih. Thank you. Stay safe in UK. Pins.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay.
Bye. Good night to all of you.
Okay. We will close this room in a few seconds. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Good night. Have a good weekend.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. And I'm going to end the Facebook with it. Bye-bye, everybody in Facebook. Bye-bye.